For a whole year, I sent 4,000 reais every month to my parents. They said they were planning a big party to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary, and as their daughter, I thought I was doing the right thing by helping. I trusted them. I believed every word, but what I discovered when I unexpectedly returned from my vacation destroyed me. The party never happened. All the money I'd sent with so much effort was used for something else, something that made me feel betrayed by my own family. My sister, who had always been the favorite and never lifted a finger to achieve anything, was parading around in a new car, paid for with my money. And when I questioned them, their response was even worse than the lie. If you've ever felt left out by your own family or had to struggle alone while others got everything handed to them, this story will touch you deeply. What I did next surprised everyone. They've never forgotten it. Hello, welcome to the Amazing Stories channel. Like and subscribe and turn on notifications. Comment below which city you're watching from. I'd love to hear it and I'd love to hear it. For as long as I can remember, I've always known something was out of place in my own home. Growing up under the same roof as my sister felt like a competition I'd never have a chance of winning. She, the youngest child, the darling, the one who got expensive toys at Christmas while I got clothes. The one who was driven to school while I walked, rain or shine. To my parents, she was the sun in their sky, and I was just a shadow. It didn't take long for me to realize that their effort would never be appreciated. But even so, I decided to follow a different path. Unlike my sister, who always had it easy, I chose to embark on a journey of sacrifice. While she stayed home with the air conditioning on, choosing clothes from fashion websites with my parents' credit card, I cleaned houses on weekends and studied at night, often falling asleep with my head on my books. Little by little, my grades led me to university. I spent years dividing my time between studies, work, and tears hidden in my pillow. I'm never proud of having cried, but it was those tears that washed away the dust of the path I chose to follow. On graduation day, only one of my parents showed up, and even then, he was in a hurry to get home. My sister, she was too busy getting her nails done for some event. I smiled anyway. I had made it. After graduating, I fought hard until I received an offer to work abroad. It was one of those moments that makes you rethink everything. I accepted not without fear. Starting a life from scratch far from everything is scary, but I went. I worked hard, learned to fend for myself, and for the first time, I felt like my life was truly in my own hands. I'd been away for years. During that time, my relationship with my parents consisted of short video calls and occasional messages. Whenever we talked, the topic always revolved around my sister. Her sister started selling costume jewelry. Her sister wants to take a fashion course. Her sister is thinking about opening a store, all of this, of course, with their money. Or rather, with mine too, as I would later discover. Then, close to the holidays, I got an excited call from my mom. She and my dad were celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary and wanted to throw a special celebration. But we need your help, honey. The party of our dreams is expensive, and now that you're stable, you can help us. I confess I hesitated, but in the end, nostalgia and a glimmer of hope, perhaps foolish, of feeling part of it made me give in. For a year, I sent 4,000 reais a month without fail. I did this because I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had begun to see me differently. During this time, I planned a surprise. I took my vacation and without warning bought a return ticket. I wanted to see the preparations, see the party taking shape, see my parents happy. Maybe I'd even see my sister changed with a look of gratitude, but what I found was a direct blow to the chest. There was no party, no preparations, not even the intention. Instead, a new car gleamed in the driveway. A car that, as I discovered minutes later, was registered in my sister's name. When I confronted my parents, I heard something that still echoes in my mind: your sister deserves it. And you're our daughter, it's your duty to help the family. We decide what to do with the money. My sister appeared soon after, fixing her hair with practiced arrogance, and said with a smirk, "Yes, sis, I deserve it. After all, I'm the star of the family. You, with this half-baked job abroad, should be grateful for being able to help." At that moment, something inside me shifted. What had been sadness turned to indignation. And from then on, I promised myself they would regret it. Not just for this episode, but for all the years they'd sidelined me, for all the times they'd made me feel inferior, unworthy. The difference was that now I wasn't that invisible girl anymore. I had strength, and I no longer needed any approval to exist, least of all from those three people who, for so long, pretended to be my family. What they didn't know was that the lesson I was about to teach would be unforgettable. I arrived home from my trip with my heart racing, as if a child inside me was eager to finally be seen. Throughout the flight, I imagined my parents thrilled to see me, my sister hugging me in surprise, perhaps even embarrassed for never having said a simple thank you, but none of that happened. When the ride-hailing car pulled up in front of the old house where I grew up, I was greeted by a closed gate and an uncomfortable silence. No movement, I clapped. I waited. When my father opened the gate, it was as if he'd seen a ghost. There was no smile, no warmth. Just a quick, "Are you here?" My mother appeared right behind him, fixing her hair as if she wasn't expecting any visitors, which she wasn't. After a few minutes of truncated conversation, I noticed the discomfort in both of them. They were nervous. They avoided looking me in the eye. That's when, out of nowhere, I caught a glimpse of the brand new car parked in the garage. White, big, spotless, the kind of car they never had while I lived there, the kind of car my sister could never afford on her own. "That's a nice car," I commented, trying to sound casual. My mother couldn't hide her pride. It was our gift to her sister. She deserved it. "You've been trying so hard lately." My throat tightened. The world stopped for a few seconds. It didn't make sense. There was no party, no memories of their 20th wedding anniversary, and now a gift worth tens of thousands of dollars to someone who didn't even work. I sat on the living room sofa, my body tense. My mother's expression changed. From pleading, he became cold, impatient. "The truth is, we're not in the mood for the party anymore, my daughter. A lot has happened, and since you were sending help, we decided to invest in something better for your sister who was without transportation." "Did you use my money?" I asked, my voice low in disbelief. "Yes, we do," my father replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You are our daughter. It is your duty to contribute to the family. We decide how to use it." I felt a knot in my stomach. For a whole year, I gave up little things. From new clothes, trips, dinners, all to help with something they said was a special milestone in their marriage. I did it out of love, out of hope, and now it was as if they'd spat on my goodwill. That's when my sister appeared, laughing, car keys dangling from her fingers, strutting around the room like she owned the world. "Hey sis, did you see my new car?" he said, like someone showing off a trophy. "Finally, something worthy of me, right? Good thing you're making good money there with your half-assed job. It's been good for something." She laughed out loud. My parents joined in unabashed. It was as if I were just an automatic bank, programmed to fulfill the desires of that spoiled, arrogant girl. My breathing became heavy, my chest felt tight. I looked around and realized nothing had changed. They would never see me as a daughter, just as a support system, a source of money. A tool of sorts, but what they didn't know was that this time I wouldn't just swallow it in silence again, not anymore. "Thank you for showing once again who you really are," I replied, standing up. "It makes me see more clearly that no place in the world is farther away than this house." My sister rolled her eyes and shrugged. "Are you hurt? Grow up, okay? If you'd tried harder, maybe you'd be the favorite too." At that moment, my gaze met my mother's, and for the first time, I saw a gleam of doubt in her eyes. A flash, as if she'd realized, albeit too late, that she'd crossed a line from which she might never return. But I no longer cared. I left that house with the same silence I'd entered, and as I weighed myself on the sidewalk, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: relief. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in everything I'd achieved so far. But not to distract me, it was the beginning of a turning point, and if they thought they could mock me and get away with it, they were sorely mistaken. Their regrets were yet to come. Returning to the country of my birth after years of struggling alone in foreign lands should have been a reunion with my roots, but that trip turned into a definitive break. A rupture. The truth, stark and raw, was laid bare before me in a way that not even time could erase. In the days following that devastating visit, I isolated myself in a simple hotel. I needed silence to process. I rehashed childhood memories, moments I'd tried to bury for so long. Like the time I received a used bicycle for my birthday while my sister a month later had a party with a buffet, themed decorations, and a new red bicycle with a basket. Or when I passed the entrance exam and heard my father say, "I hope you don't get pregnant in the middle of college like so-and-so." They never believed me. They never expected anything. And maybe that's why I went so far. I decided I wouldn't let anyone know about my steps anymore. They didn't deserve to know about me. I packed my bags in silence and anticipated my return. But something inside me, once wounded and calloused, began to harden, and with it came clarity. The clarity that no matter how much I did to my parents and sister, I would always be nothing more than a useful tool, never their beloved daughter. Upon returning to the country where I worked, I rediscovered my life with a new perspective. That experience, cruel as it was, had given me a precious gift, the certainty of who I was without them. And most importantly, the power to decide who I would allow into my life from then on. In the following months, I focused my energies on growth. I took on new projects. I was promoted, my name began to circulate among the company's executives, but I remained silent about my family. I cut off all money transfers, I blocked messages. I only responded to formal, short, and to the point emails when necessary. That's when the attempts to contact me began. First, my mother texted me saying she was worried about my silence. I ignored her. Then came more subtle attempts, like audio of my sister laughing, saying, "Sis, how are things over there? Are you okay?" That was pure cynicism. And finally, the blatant indirectness, "We need some support and you could be more present with the family, right?" Family. The word began to lose its emotional weight. For me, the blood bond was no longer sustainable. One day, I received a call from my boss. There was an important international conference at the company's headquarters, and I had been chosen to represent my department. It was a rare opportunity, a recognition few achieved. The news spread among colleagues, and like a domino effect, it reached back to my home country. Days later, my sister reappeared. She texted me a short video. She was standing next to her new car, now dirty with a dented bumper. "Hey, Mana, so I had a little car trouble. My parents are a little tight, I thought you could help. After all, you're here successful with your life sorted out. And I'm your sister, right?" The audacity was unshakable. That's when I realized it wasn't just carelessness, it was an addiction. A cycle they fed, my effort, their reward, and my constant exclusion. And like every vicious cycle, it could only be broken by those who acknowledge their pain and decide enough is enough. That night, I sat at my computer. I opened a new document. I wrote a long, direct, unsentimental email. In it, I explained everything I'd been holding back for years. From childhood neglect to recent humiliation, I wrote not to provoke but to liberate. I ended with a phrase that to this day I carry with me. "Being a family is a daily act, not a convenient excuse. From now on, I allow myself to be happy far from those who never saw me." I sent it. The next morning, my cell phone rang repeatedly. Missed calls from my mother, my father, even my sister. I didn't answer any of them. For the first time, silence was my most powerful response, but that was just the beginning. They didn't yet know that what came next would change everything, including the way they would see me forever. The days that followed that email were intense. The silence I had feared for years was now my weapon. And it was only when I stopped trying to be accepted that, curiously, I started to get noticed. Messages and calls kept coming. At first, they had a subtle, almost comical tone, as if everything could be resolved with a joke from my sister or a "that's not exactly what we meant" from my mother. Then the tone changed. The lightheartedness gave way to attempts at emotional blackmail. "Are you really going to ignore us after everything we've done for you?" my father wrote. The sentence made my stomach churn. What was this all about? The roof over my head growing up? The food they put on the table for me while showering my sister with gifts? Or was it the constant erasure of my victories, replaced by proud smiles directed only at my favorite daughter? I didn't answer. The answer this time would be practice. It was time to put aside words and demonstrate with actions what it means to no longer be manipulated. At work, my reputation was gaining traction. I was invited to participate in a new company expansion project, which would give me even more visibility and financial return. A promotion offer was about to be formalized. What I was achieving now was the pure fruit of my own hard work, and no one could take that away from me. Then, one cold morning, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered on impulse. It was an old family friend, one of those who'd spent time with us growing up but had drifted apart over time. He spoke carefully, as if treading on glass. "I'm sorry to call, but I thought you should know. Your parents are going through a difficult time." I was silent. He continued. "Your father's business went bankrupt. He sold his car and even mortgaged some of his belongings. They say he has debts in your mother's name. And your sister, well, it seems she can't even afford the car you helped buy. That might have caused me some pain years ago. But in that moment, the feeling that washed over me wasn't sadness nor relief. It was clarity. All my life, they placed the burden of guilt on me. They made me feel like I always owed them something for being their daughter, for having grown up with the bare minimum. And when I finally started winning, instead of celebrating with me, they used my victory to benefit those who never lifted a finger. Now that the house of cards was crumbling, they sought me out again, not out of regret, but out of need. And I knew it. That same week, I received a long message from my mom. It was different from the previous ones. There were no emojis, no sarcastic tones. She was cold, direct, and yet filled with hidden pride. Daughter, we're going through a delicate situation. I know you're busy and perhaps hurt, but we're your family. Your sister is struggling and we can't help her anymore. She needs you. I hope you understand. It was always like that. The focus was never on them but on her, as if her entire life revolved around her youngest daughter. As if she were the center of a universe where everyone was supposed to serve her. The most ironic thing, they never apologized to me. Not a single word of regret for embezzling the money, lying about the party, or even throwing me out. All they wanted was to reactivate the machine I'd decided to turn off, my pocket. That night, I sat down at the computer with a different intention. I began organizing my documents. I reinforced protections on my bank accounts. I removed my parents' names from any possible connection. I formalized my decision to no longer transfer funds. I did everything legally, safely, and definitively. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood that loving someone doesn't mean submitting to being used. In the following days, their desperation grew. They even called me from my aunt's landline. They left familiar messages. One of them said my sister had cried when she found out I'd cut ties for good. But crying for her was always a strategy. I knew that cry, the same one she used when she wanted something from my parents. The same one that accompanied a request for a new card, a new cell phone, a second chance at something she hadn't even really tried. The most surprising thing, however, was yet to come. 2 weeks later, in the middle of a video conference, I received a notification on my phone. A message from my father: we need to talk, please, we're sorry. Seriously, it was the first time they'd used the word repentant. But what did they really want? Sincere repentance or just one last chance to get more out of me? I was about to find out. The words "we're sorry" still echoed in my mind when I decided to accept the video call my parents insisted on making. I took a deep breath before answering. A part of me still wished, however small, that this was the beginning of a true reconciliation, that the feeling of regret would be accompanied by empathy, by humility. But the other, more rational part kept me alert. The image stabilized, and the three of them were there: my father, my mother, and my sister, sitting on the sofa in the living room, the same room where I'd been ignored so many times. The first thing I noticed was the weariness on their faces, not the weariness of someone lamenting past mistakes, but the weariness of someone about to make a difficult request. After the cold greetings, my mother got straight to the point: we're facing hardships. The household bills have piled up. The situation is complicated. My father made a vague gesture with his hand, as if trying to reinforce that the situation was beyond their control. We recognize that we made a mistake with you, he began, choosing his words carefully, but now we need to look forward. Your sister is unemployed, the bills are overdue, and the power was almost cut off this week. My sister crossed her arms and looked bored, as if the matter were of little importance to her. When she noticed my gaze, she gave a wry smile. You could help us, right, sis? You're doing well living abroad, earning hard currency. It doesn't cost anything, go. At that moment, all hope of redemption died right there in front of the screen. There was no remorse. There was no conscience. There was only self-interest. The remorse they mentioned was just another mask, another attempt to suck me in with a more convincing excuse. So that's all it is? I asked, looking at each of them in turn. Did you call me here to ask for money? My mother frowned, offended. Don't say that, of course we miss you. But the situation is dire. You could lend a hand. After all, she's our daughter. I hung up the call before the anger could completely overwhelm me. In the days that followed, I threw myself back into work with more intensity than ever. But deep down, I felt like there was still something unfinished. They would keep trying. They would keep looking for ways to get closer out of convenience. Then, one quiet afternoon, I received a call from the same family friend who had warned me about their crisis weeks earlier. He, unaware of anything, let slip the information that lit a fire under my skin. They're putting the house up for sale. I heard they can't afford to pay the bills. They should accept any reasonable offer. My first reaction was surprise. Selling the house where they'd built the facade of the perfect family, where they'd so often ignored me and exalted my sister, was the biggest sign of defeat they could have given. But my second reaction was more instinctive. I needed that house. Not out of revenge, not out of spite, but because she represented everything I'd overcome. And perhaps that was all I needed to finalize to move forward in peace. I enlisted the help of a fellow lawyer from the country where I lived. I explained everything and said I needed to make the purchase indirectly, without anyone knowing it was me. We created a legal structure through a trusted intermediary. Soon, the offer was accepted. They were desperate for cash and barely asked any questions about the buyer. Days later, I received confirmation. The house was officially mine. I waited. I wanted to see how they would react when they found out. The discovery came quickly. A week later, I received a flood of messages. The first was from my sister, "Did you buy the house? Are you making fun of us?" Then from my mother, "Why did you do that? What kind of daughter buys her parents' house behind their backs?" And finally from my father, "If your goal was to humiliate us, congratulations, you succeeded. Just remember, this house has history, it was our life." I only responded once. Now she has a new story. And no, it wasn't out of revenge, it was to end the cycle. I blocked everyone. The house was empty, silent, no shouting, no favoritism. For the first time, that place belonged to someone who knew how to value their own efforts. What they didn't know was that the real loss wasn't the house, but access to me, and that was just the beginning of their regret. The news that I was the new owner of the house spread faster than I imagined. Within hours, my email and message inbox was flooded with inflammatory words, accusations, and desperate attempts to get me to return the property. But the time for submission was over. For days, I said nothing. I let them feel the weight of reality. There was no longer any guaranteed comfort. There was no longer a silent daughter who endured everything in silence while others enjoyed themselves. It wasn't until the following week that I decided to break the silence. I sent a formal, direct, emotionless email. "Given the situation, I'm willing to make an offer. You can continue living in the house now owned by me as long as you accept a monthly rental agreement. Furthermore, I want a full refund of the amount I sent over 12 months for your supposed wedding celebration party, which, as you know, was used to buy my sister's car. The total amount adjusted will be divided into monthly installments added to the rent. No exceptions. If they accept, they can remain in the property. Otherwise, they have 30 days to vacate." There were no flourishes, no attempt to mend ties. I waited. 2 days later, I received my mother's response. A long email filled with attempts at emotional appeal. Phrases like, "We never thought you'd treat us this way," and "It's not fair to force this on us," were interspersed with veiled attempts to guilt trip me. But the essence was there. They accepted the proposal. The truth is, they had no choice. The house had already been put in my name. For them, losing their home would be devastating. And unlike everything they did to me, I gave them a dignified alternative with rules. With consequences, but still dignified. My sister didn't hide her anger. She sent me audio messages saying I was cruel, cold, and that just because she got a job abroad, she thought she was better than everyone else. Little did she know that my greatest achievement wasn't the job, it was my freedom. The freedom to finally say no. The freedom to set limits. The freedom to be respected, even if it meant imposing what I was never given, justice. The contract was signed with the same coldness that had surrounded our relationship throughout our lives. Now my father deposited the agreed amount monthly, with his name printed on the receipts as the tenant of the daughter he claimed never had a future. My mother, who had so often turned a blind eye to my efforts, now sent me reports with photos of the property's condition as any renter would. My sister still had the car, now worn out and no longer as shiny as it once was. She tried to maintain a pose that no longer reflected reality. And the worst punishment for her was having no one to turn to when luxuries were tight. Me? I returned to my life with the lightness of someone who's closed a painful chapter. Of someone who rewrote his own history with steady hands. I didn't make a fuss. I didn't share it with the world. My victory was intimate, silent, and powerful. Over the months, I noticed their silence became more constant, not because they had changed, but because they understood for the first time that I was no longer that girl who was content with crumbs of affection. One night, I received a last message from my mother. "Maybe one day you'll forgive us. The house is being taken care of. We're baking everything." But it hurts to see our daughter drift away like this. I didn't respond, not out of spite. But because some answers can't be put into words, the greatest answer they had was a reflection of their own choices. I grew, I flourished, I overcame, even as the forgotten daughter. And now they paid for having planted contempt where they could have reaped pride. Today, when I look back, I don't carry hatred. I carry memories of a lonely journey full of potholes where each step taught me who I am. And I carry the certainty that the greatest legacy I've built is not repeating their story. In the house where I grew up, 3 people now live who are reminded every month that love isn't an obligation, it's a choice, and that every choice has a price. They chose to ignore me, now they must pay the price. If this story touched your heart or made you reflect, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next exciting stories we bring here. And tell me in the comments, would you have done what this daughter did? Would you have the courage to put an end to this and show your worth even in front of your own family? Your opinion is very important and I love reading each comment with care. And also, tell me which city are you watching this video from? I'll go through the comments and leave a heart next to the names of the cities and people who comment. Oh, and if you know someone who needs to hear this story, who has experienced or is going through something similar, share this video. Maybe he or she will find the strength they need to change their own story here. Thank you so much for being here. See you in the next video.